What's going on, guys? Tower number 9 here, and today we are doing the, I think, maybe second to last, we'll say, second to last installment of the Saturday spoiler review. My apologies for the delay on this. You'll note that it is not Saturday. It is either Monday or Tuesday, depending on when this gets uploaded. And the fact of the matter is I was casting for an extended period of time on Saturday and did not feel up to making this video at that time. If you want to check out the cast, I believe the videos are up at the MaclunkyGaming channel. I will have a link to them in the video description below. I've been doing a bunch of I've been doing a bunch of live commentary on planetary qualifier events, so that's been a lot of fun. And we'll leave it there for now, and let's look at some of the new cards that we've seen from Twilight of the Republic. So first up, we have Bo-Katan Kryze, a Death Watch Lieutenant, aka Evil Bo-Katan. She is a 2-cost 2/3. While you control another Mandalorian unit, this unit gains Overwhelm and Saboteur. While you control another Trooper unit, she gets +1 power, and she is Aggression Villainy. So 2 for a 2/3 is on curve, but not exciting. The 2-cost 3/2 stat line has generally been more popular, but Bo-Katan, if you have other units to enable her, is potentially 2 for a 3/3 Overwhelm Saboteur, which is amazing. The question is just, can you get another Mandalorian Trooper out in order to buff her before she gets removed by something else? I think that on her own, this card is probably not going to see all that much play. I think there are a lot of Troopers. I think 2 for a 2/3 +1 power while you control a Trooper is like okay. You know, maybe that's good enough to see play on its own. I'm not sure. It's at least worth considering. You know, both types of token unit this set are Troopers, so there is that to consider. So maybe that's good enough on its own. But if you have a deck that has Mandalorian Troopers, then she's potentially really good. And you know, Overwhelm on a unit with 2 or 3 power isn't amazing, but you can potentially scale her up with some upgrades, which is another Mandalorian theme. Overall, I think in the right deck, she could well be strong. And even in a deck where you don't have other Mandalorian stuff, but you do have some Trooper synergy, she could be solid there. 2 for a 3/3 is pretty good. 2 for a conditional 3/3, yeah, it's worse, but it might still be good enough to see some play. And it is worth noting that Double Red Bo-Katan is a 2-cost 3/3 base. Fleet Lieutenant is a 2-cost 3/3 base, and both those cards are very good. So that is a kind of fundamentally strong profile if you can enable it here. All right, next up. Anakin Skywalker, What It Takes to Win. So when I first saw this leader, I thought he was really bad. As an action, exhaust and deal 2 damage to your base to attack with a unit. If it's attacking a unit, it gets +2 power for this attack. And then on the other side, he deploys on 6 resources, 4/7, fairly standard stat line, Force Jedi Republic traits. Overwhelm, when attacking an enemy unit, deal excess damage to the opponent's base, and he gets +1 power for every 5 damage on your base. So I saw this as a leader that was sort of split between multiple things. If you deal the damage to your base, to get this power buff, you can excel in unit combat, but you're damaging your base to do it. And then when you deploy him, he's extra strong based on the amount of damage on your base. So at first, I had thought this didn't make a lot of sense. I've been growing more positive on him. I think that if you think about effects like Fleet Lieutenant's a really good card because it allows the unit to attack with +2 power. Now, to be fair, some of that time you're attacking the base, but some of the time you're using it to get a more favorable unit combat result. And Anakin always having that at the expense of damage to your base is pretty good. There's a philosophy from other games, which is only the last point of life matters, or life is a resource. And basically the idea there is that sometimes you should be totally fine with damaging your base in order, or, you know, taking damage in order to get some kind of positive result, whether that be, you know, in Magic, maybe the opponent's attacking with a bunch of creatures, and if you blocked, you would prevent yourself from taking damage, but you're not close to losing, and you would lose creatures that are important to you in the blocks. In that sort of situation, maybe you just take the damage. In Flesh and Blood TCG, someone's attacking you, you don't have to block every attack. It might well be better to just not block, let them hit you, especially if they don't have relevant on-hit effects. Just soak up the damage and swing back. So that's an interesting philosophy, and Star Wars Unlimited's mechanics haven't always been as easy for it as with others. I think there are some leaders that play into this, most notably Sabine, who's really good, where she damages her own base, but that's usually not a big problem since she tends to be the aggressor. But with Anakin, I think there's going to be more of that style where you're damaging your own base to get an advantage, and then you once you flip him, he gets extra power because of that damage that you took. And I see him as a deck that might have some interesting gameplay where you're sort of trying to you're trying to balance taking damage on your base to get an advantage and buff Anakin when he comes out with not taking too much damage so that you get overwhelmed. And I think it could be really fun. I'm actually excited to try him out, even though I didn't like him when he was first revealed. Next up, we have the Droideka Security. This is a 6-cost Vigilance Villainy ground unit. It is a 4/5 with Exploit 2. While playing this card, defeat up to 2 units you control. This card costs 2 less for each unit defeated this way, and it also has Sentinel. Units in this arena can't attack your non-Sentinel units or your base. So Droideka Security, that's an interesting card to me. And I know there's been a controversy about this card not having shielded because it does in the art and it does in the theme, but shield tokens aren't in this set. So, I don't honestly have a huge problem with that. Like, if you go by the lore, every ship should have shielded, or almost like not a TIE fighter, but like a lot of the ships in the game have shields in the lore. Yes, Droidekas have shields in the lore. Yes, it might have been better if they used an art piece where there wasn't a visible shield, but I don't have a huge problem with it. And gameplay wise, I think this card's actually pretty good. So, 6 for a 4/5 Sentinel isn't that great. It's not actually unplayable. It's like bad, but it's not unplayable, as opposed to some other exploit units, which are just like absolutely horrible if you play them without exploit. And if you're playing this as a 4/5 Sentinel for 4 and getting rid of a battle droid, or even one for 2, I think it has a lot of potential. So like other exploit units, it's better when you exploit it, but I think it is also, I think it's not as reliant on exploit as some others, and it's a Sentinel unit with decent stats, especially if you're getting it out earlier in the game. I think this one's going to be pretty solid. Shield token controversy aside. Clone, 7-cost ground unit. It is a really weird card. So it's a command unit, it's 0/0. You may have this unit interplay as a copy of a non-leader, non-vehicle unit in play, except it gains the clone trait and is not unique. So this card, so technically, yes, you can have it interplay as a copy of a space unit, but in practice you can't because all the space units in the game right now are vehicles. If we see like a space slug or the space whales or whatever, maybe that's going to change in the future. I'm not entirely sure how that will be ruled, but in any case, clone is a card where you can use this either on your own stuff or on your opponent. So one thing that could be really crazy, let's say you have Supreme Leader Snoke. Now you bring out a clone and you have 2 Supreme Leader Snokes in play, and all your opponent's stuff gets -4/-4. That seems really good. Also kind of thematically fitting. But you can also use this with your opponent's stuff. Let's say that your opponent has Darth Vader in play. You can play your clone, have it interplay as a copy of Vader. You still get ambushed. You still get win played, as I understand it. And that could be a lot of value. The main problem I see with this card is just that it's very expensive. Because it's very expensive and it doesn't work on vehicles, the number of targets for it are more limited than an effect like this might have been otherwise. I think that I kind of would have preferred to see something like this cost 6, but I could be wrong. I think that in the right situation, it can be very strong anyway, and it's not as exciting as it would be at 6, but I think it's still, if you're paying 7 for a copy of a unit that costs 7 or more and is a really good unit, that could easily be worth it, especially since it gives you a way to get around unique and have multiple copies of really powerful units in play. So ultimately, I think this is a pretty strong card, but its high cost makes it a little more niche than it would be if it were coming in a bit cheaper. I think it's ultimately going to be, I think it ultimately will see at least some play, but ideally in decks that have their own targets to enable with it, because you won't reliably have an opposing unit that is worth cloning with it being such an expensive card. Like if you play against a Sabine deck, it's like, well, there aren't any cards in that deck that are worth paying 7 to copy under normal circumstances. Now, maybe like sometimes you could copy K2 or something and it would be worth it, but in general, I think that against some decks, you're going to want to have targets for clone in your own build rather than copying them, just because they won't have anything that's worth 7 to copy. Okay. Next up, we have Saw Gerrera. Resistance is not terrorism. This is Heroism Saw from a earlier period in his life. He is a 4/6 with Raid 2. On attack, if your base has 15 or more damage on it, deal 1 damage to each enemy ground unit. He's a 4/8 with Raid 2. And that is a cool stat line. He is difficult to deal with, and he hits pretty hard. The main downside with him, I'm kind of tired of saying this. I've said this with a lot of different cards. He is an expensive unit with no immediate board impact. So when you play Saw, he doesn't do anything immediately. The opponent gets a chance to deal with him before he attacks. Now, maybe his high HP makes up for it. He does seem like quite annoying to remove, and his on-attack ability is potentially quite good, especially if the opponent has a large number of tokens. Like, he can potentially wipe out a droid army, for instance. But once again, expensive unit, no immediate board impact. I think that he will see a lot more play in decks with ECL or Heroic Intervention or some other means of granting timely intervention. And, without ambush, he will suffer from sometimes being a card that you play and he takes your whole turn, and then your opponent gets to do their whole turn, and then he doesn't actually get a chance to attack. But, we'll have to see. Okay, next up we have Fives in Search of Truths. Fives is a 5-cost 5/5 cunning ground unit. Bit of a pun there. He has the Republic clone and trooper traits. He has Saboteur. When you play an event, you may put a clone unit from your discard pile on the bottom of your deck. If you do, draw a card. So Fives is an interesting unit because he allows you to recur some strong clones and also is giving you some card draw at the same time, which is pretty sweet. He is, however, an expensive unit with no immediate board impact. The 5-cost 5/5 stat line is now actually bad. So 5-cost 5/5 was on curve in set 1, but set 2 brought a bunch of units that have 11 or 12 points of stats at 5 cost. So his stats are kind of bad. He does have Saboteur, which might help. And in the right situation, I could see him being good, but he seems, I don't know, expensive unit, no immediate board impact, ability is sort of situational, card draw isn't that good in this game. Ultimately, I'm kind of skeptical, but I don't doubt there's some deck where he can play a relevant role. I'm just like, I don't think he's a superstar. Okay, next up, Asajj Ventress, Unparalleled Adversary. So Ventress is a cunning villainy leader. As an action, you can exhaust to attack with a unit, and if you played an event this phase, it gets +1 power for this attack. And then Ventress deploys as a 4 deployment 3/4 with the Force, Separatist, and Sith traits. On attack, if you played an event this phase, this unit gets +1 power for this attack. It deals combat damage before the defender. If the defender is defeated, it deals no combat damage. So she can get a permanent shoot first. If you have played, I say permanent, she can get a shoot first for the phase if you've played an event, which is really nice. And she's potentially hitting for 4 when she flips at 4. Now, she does only have 4 HP, and that has been a substantial weakness for other leaders in the past. But I actually think she's pretty cool, and she's an interesting option for a more aggro villain deck. Historically, aggro decks have mostly been heroism. Well, Ventress is an option for an aggro villain leader that isn't Kylo Ren. Not that Kylo Ren is terrible, but Ventress has some cool stuff going for her. I think the question is just, can you get enough events in there and get like a good ratio to reliably activate these abilities? Can you also be playing these events in a way that is relevant? And we'll have to see what happens. I think it'll be interesting. I think it'll be interesting to test out, and I think new aggro leaders are cool, especially ones that are in villainy. It is also worth noting that, like Kylo Ren, Ventress is a Force unit and deploys on 4 resources, which means that you can potentially be firing off those Force throws and getting that fallen lightsaber going pretty early in the game if you want. So interesting little tidbit there. I think she looks cool. Is she going to be the strongest ever? I'm not sure, but I'm excited to test with her. Next up, Roger, 1-cost Vigilance upgrade, +1/+1. When defeated, attach this upgrade to a friendly battle droid token. Yeah, this is a really cool card. I really like it. Obviously, it is a battle droid deck card mostly, but 1 for +1/+1 is it's decently playable. There's a bunch of 1 for +1/+1 plus some smaller situational effects type cards. This is another one of them, and I really like the idea that this can potentially be attacked. Like you can play this on a unit, and then that unit dies, and you buff a battle droid, and then potentially that unit dies, and you buff another battle droid. So I think it's really cool. Especially if you have a deck with a lot of battle droids, I think this is a nice way to get some bonus stats in a way that will be maybe annoying for opponents to deal with. And I believe this, when defeated, applies both if the unit that the upgrade is on is defeated, and also if they remove it with something like a disabling Fang Fighter. So this is potentially a way to get as long as you can keep battle droids on the field, this is a way to get some bonus stats for them that might be annoying for the opponent to deal with, and I like that. Pyrrhic Assault, 3-cost double command event. For this phase, each friendly unit gains, when defeated, deal 2 damage to an enemy unit. And it is a legendary. I think this is one of those cards that's really, really good in the right situation, but I'm not sure how often that situation will actually be applicable. So it's difficult for me to tell. It's difficult for me to tell how good this will actually be. So, like, let's say that you play this and you have a bunch of small tokens, and now you can crash them into the opponent and get a bunch of extra value, because when you do that, you get to deal 2 damage to an enemy unit. The main problem that I have with this card is that I really wish it were unit or base. When it's unit only, it's more of a, like, try to get control of the board with token combat type thing, and I would be more excited about it if it also had aggro potential as well. But I guess command isn't really the most aggro color. Maybe that would be more of a double red type theme. I don't know. It's not the greatest double aspect card in my opinion, but it might well see some play, especially if you can generate a lot of tokens. You know, if you have 3 or 4 battle droids, and all of a sudden, instead of hitting an enemy unit for 1 and dying, they're hitting an enemy unit for 1, dying, and then doing another 2. You know, you could in fact gain a lot of board advantage there. It goes across arenas, so you could have your battle droid take out a 1 HP unit in the ground arena. Your battle droid dies, and you deal 2 damage to take out their Merc gunship or whatever in space. Also, I don't know. I think it has at least some potential, but it's not the most amazing, thrilling card ever. However, it does have very high potential if you have a wide board. And it goes even better if you also have General Krell in there, which is very fitting thematically. Next up, we have the Guerilla Insurgency. This is an 8-cost aggression event. Each player defeats a resource they control and discards 2 cards from their hand, deal 4 damage to each ground unit. Now, this applies to you as well as to your opponent, which is annoying, but it is potentially a board wipe, at least on the ground, at least of smaller units. It deramps both players, which is interesting, and it causes both players to discard. So I don't know that I love it. I think I could see a world in which this card is playable at some time. I don't know when that will be. It could be very soon. Having the potential to board wipe the opponent while also defeating a resource and discarding cards can make it so that, let's say your opponent has a big advantage on the ground, your ground arena is not present or is very weak. By playing this, you kill a bunch of their units on the ground, and defeating a resource and discarding the cards from their hand potentially makes it so that they can't recover much in that turn. One of the problems with board wipes in this game is they tend to be very expensive, so when you play them, the opponent often has a chance to replay stuff and gain control, but Guerilla Insurgency potentially messes with that by also discarding cards from hand. Is it going to be good enough to see play? I don't know. If we see a lot of swarms of like multiple small units, it might well be good, but we'll have to see how the meta shakes out. Padawan Starfighter, 2-cost 1/3 Vigilance Space Unit, Jedi Republic Vehicle Fighter. While you control a Force unit or a Force upgrade, this unit gets +1/+1. So 2 for a 1/3 is bad, 2 for a 2/4 is good. This is one of those cards where if you don't enable the condition, it's not very strong. If you do enable the condition, it ends up being a bit above curve. I'm not sure that it's enough above curve to make up for being this conditional, but we'll kind of have to see. I don't actually think Force upgrades exist in the game right now. I can't think off the top of my head of any upgrade that actually is Force. I know Devotion isn't, lightsabers aren't. Maybe there will be one in the future. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what the story with that is. Maybe there even is one from this set that hasn't been previewed yet. But it could also just be future proofing. As it stands, there are a fair few Force units, although many of them are expensive. But you could potentially play this turn 1, turn 2, play Ezra Bridger. Now you have a Force unit out. Now this is a 2/4. Could be cool. Could be cool. Ultimately, I don't think this is like a thrilling card, but if you have a deck with lots and lots of Force stuff, maybe it's worth playing. Daughter of Dathomir, 4-cost Vigilance ground unit, 3/5 Force and Night traits. While this unit's undamaged, it gains Restore 2. When this unit attacks, heal 2 damage from your base. I don't think this is very good. The stats are below curve. The ability... So basically, this kind of feels like a bad version of Kanan Jarrus to me. So Kanan is a 4-cost... In fact, let's just bring up Kanan right here. So Kanan is a 4-cost 4/5. Sweetie Bee is maybe being a little slow. Okay, well, yeah, there we go. So Kanan is a 4-cost 4/5. He has Force, Jedi, Rebel, and Spectre, so he has more traits. He does have, of course, the heroism aspect, so he is a little harder to fit into a build. But on attack, you may discard 1 card from the defending player's deck for each friendly Spectre unit, heal 1 damage from your base for each different aspect among the discarded cards. In practice, this is very often like Restore 1.5 on average or something. It depends on the specific composition of your opponent's deck, and there is actually a chance that you'll restore 0 if you hit a generic card, an aspectless card. But the Daughter of Dathomir has worse base stats, worse traits. Its Restore ability is also conditional on being undamaged instead of on what you flip. Ultimately, it kind of seems like a worse version of Kanan, but it is another unit with the Force trait. It does seem like probably playable in Limited. I don't think it's, super ultra garbage. I just sort of feel like Kanan does the same thing better. All right, next up. And you can play Daughter of Dathomir in a dark side deck. I just don't think what you get for it is so stunning that the versatility is very exciting, because it's just not a very thrilling effect. I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe she'll end up being stronger. Maybe she'll end up being stronger than she looks. The Force trait is good, but I'm not very excited about this unit. Grievous Reassembly. This is a 2-cost. Event. In Vigilance, heal 3 damage from a unit, create a battle droid token. I like this card. I think this card's tight. So healing a unit is a kind of niche effect because it is not so common for units to be in multiple combats, but there are some situations where this can happen, and this works on a leader. And in addition to healing, you're also creating a token. That could be quite good. You could potentially have a situation where that token, either is just another unit on the board for you, or it's a unit that you're going to be able to use exploit on to play a bigger unit later, or it's something that's going to block power of the dark side. I think this is cool. Is this going to be worth a deck slot? I don't know. But I like cards like this. I think they're interesting, and it is worth noting that I believe you can play this even if there's no damage to heal, and you still get the battle droid token. So worst case, it's 2 for a 1/1. 2 for a 1/1 is very bad, but I believe you can still play this even if there are no units on the board. So it can be like backup insurance. At least I did something on the first turn. I don't know. I kind of like it. Maybe I'm crazy. I like it. All right. Next up is Reprocess. 3-cost. Command Villainy. Choose up to 4 units in your discard pile. Put them on the bottom of your deck in a random order and create that many battle droid tokens. I think this card is sick. So you can spend 3 to get 4 battle droid tokens. That's really good. That's above curve stats, and it's spread across multiple units. Now the downside is you have to have 4 units in your discard pile to do that. So you wouldn't be able to do it on turn 2 unless something really weird had happened and you had to discard a bunch of cards for some reason. But it's nevertheless, I think, a pretty efficient effect, and it helps you get more time against some of the decks that are maybe trying to mill you. So, if you're playing, let's say that you're playing against Double Blue Iden or something like that, this card can potentially be like, okay, I'm going to refill. I'm going to play this and I'm going to refill my deck with some units that are going to be annoying. And not only did I just generate a bunch of units to attack my opponent with, but I also bought myself more time before I mill out. Overall, I think this is a really cool card. I don't know how to pronounce this guy's name. We're going to say Huyang. Huyang Enduring Instructor. 3-cost command ground unit, 2/4 Jedi droid. When played, choose another friendly unit. While this unit is in play, the chosen unit gets +2/+2. I think this guy is really good. So Wing Leader is a 3-cost space unit, which is a 2/1, and when played, you can give 2 experience tokens to a friendly rebel unit. Huyang is like that, except his stats are way better, and the unit doesn't have to be rebel. You can buff anything. Now the downside is when you lose this unit, you also lose the buff. It's not like experience tokens that stay around forever. And for that reason, I think that there's kind of different vulnerabilities and stuff, but I believe this ability is strong enough that I think this guy is going to see quite widespread play, because Wing Leader is a really strong card. And this is, in the best situation, a Wing Leader with better stats and that works on anything, and that, in my opinion, is really good. So I think we're going to see this unit a lot. I could be wrong, but I suspect this will be played in both heroism and villainy decks, because the effect here just seems really strong to me. Yeah. Plus he has the Jedi trait, and that might mean something, and the Droid trait, and that might mean something. So, you know, there's some potential synergies there. Strategic Acumen. This is a 1-cost command upgrade. Attached unit gains action. Exhaust to play a unit from your hand. It costs 1 less. You also get +2 HP. So this ability is, in the past, found on the Rebel Dispatcher, and can be very annoying with the Rebel Dispatcher, potentially allowing you to bring out a powerful unit earlier. This allows any unit to gain that power and also toughens it up. I think it could well be good for it's sort of a soft ramp type thing, because it does require you to exhaust your unit. There's a lot of ways to mess with it. It doesn't get a leader out faster, but it can get a powerful card onto the board more quickly than you would otherwise be able to do. And it kind of turns a unit into a potential support piece, as well as something that you can use for direct fighting. I think it's cool. I don't know how successful it will be, or how widespread it will see play in constructed, but I think it's definitely limited playable, might well be constructed playable, and I think has a lot of potential. In Defense of Kamino, 4-cost command event. For this phase, each friendly Republic unit gains Restore 2, and when defeated, create a Clone Trooper unit, or a Clone Trooper token, rather. Yeah, this is interesting. I think if you have a deck with a lot of Republic units, you can potentially play this card and then gain a substantial advantage for fights that turn. Not only do you have the restore, but if your units are getting taken out, you're getting more units to replace them. You know, I don't necessarily like all these buff your whole side types of cards. In the past, they haven't really seemed that great, but this is a set focused on having tokens and multiple small units and stuff, and maybe in that context this can be really good, especially because, you know, some of the other cards that buff your army, what happens if you play them and the opponent ends up, you know, doing a board wipe? You know, maybe they do a bombing run, or maybe they do something else that's going to do damage to a bunch of different units. Well, this one, you know, it gives you some insulation against that, because if they wipe your units, you get more clones. So, you know, I think this could be pretty good. Resolute, under Anakin's command, 10-cost aggression heroism space unit, 8/8 Republic vehicle capital ship, and it costs 1 less to play for every 5 damage on your base. When played and on attack, deal 2 damage to an enemy unit and each other enemy unit with the same name as that unit. So this is a real, so for 10, this is probably not that great, but it shouldn't be that hard to get this discounted, and this has the potential to wipe out an army of tokens immediately. If they have, you know, they could have 200 Clone Trooper tokens, and this would kill all of them as long as they didn't have an HP buff. Same thing for Battle Droids. And even if they don't have multiple units with the same name, dealing 2 damage to an enemy unit can often be quite good, as we've seen with Ruthless Raider. So I think this could be a pretty cool card. It is expensive for its base price. I think you're really hoping that you've taken some damage to your base to allow this card to see play earlier. If you're playing this at, like, you know, 8 or even 7 resources, I think it's looking a lot better than if you're playing it at 10. And it is a nice counter to the token armies, as well as a big block of stats. And even in the situation where your opponent doesn't have a bunch of tokens, you are still potentially doing some damage. The fact that this ability also applies on attack as well as when played is also very cool. You can potentially play this out, blow up a bunch of clones or droids, or just damage another unit, and then just keep doing it whenever you swing. So I think this is a pretty cool card. It seems designed to fight against token armies. I don't know how common token armies are going to be, but even if they aren't that common, the potential discount on this thing is quite helpful, and I think it's going to be solid. Heavy Persuader Tank, 7-cost aggression ground unit, 6/5 Separatist droid vehicle tank. It has exploit 2. When playing this card, defeat up to 2 units you control. This card costs 2 resources less for each unit defeated this way, and when played, you may deal 2 damage to a ground unit. Yeah, I don't think, this is another one for 7. I'm not loving it. I don't think it's unplayable at 7. It's okay at 7, but it's not great at 7 because 2 damage to a ground unit when played is a kind of small effect for something that's that big. But if you're playing this for 5, this is looking pretty good. And if you're playing this for 3, it's looking crazy. So like many other exploit cards, when you have exploit enabled, this card's a lot scarier. This one, when you don't have exploit enabled, it's like kind of, sort of okay, but it's still going to be, those are below curve stats for the cost, and the when played effect isn't going to be high impact enough it isn't going to be reliably high impact enough for it to be worth it without exploit. With exploit, though, that's a different matter. I think paying 5 for this is pretty good, and I think paying 3 for it is great. So, like I said, if you have exploit, this is looking pretty scary, and if you don't, it's looking not awesome. Next up, clear the field. 2-cost cunning heroism event. Choose a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less. Return it and each enemy non-leader unit with the same name as it to their owner's hands. This is a board wipe against tokens because your tokens getting returned to hand just die. So if you say battle droid or if you say clone trooper, you get to wipe all of those out. In a situation where you aren't wiping out a token army, this is essentially a situational, cheaper waylay. So it's like waylay in that it's going to bounce a unit and potentially multiple units, actually, which can be really scary. So like even if there's no tokens, let's say that your opponent has started with 2 battlefield marines. Well, you can bounce both of those with 1 card, which is pretty sweet. But overall, I think tokens aside, this is probably worse than the real waylay or spare the target, because those cards can target opponents that play expensive units. So waylay, for instance, is great against Obi-Wan. This card doesn't do anything against Obi-Wan. The conditional nature of this makes me unsure how it will work, but if we see a multiple small unit type meta, especially with tokens, I think this can be potentially huge. The fact that it's so cheap is also really notable because most potential board wipes in this game are very expensive, and this one really isn't. So I think it's quite a cool card. Patrolling AAT, 5-cost 4/5 Sentinel ground unit, and it is a separatist vehicle and tank. It has villainy and no other aspects. I think this is actually a good card. So 5 for a 4/5 Sentinel is not amazing, but it's not crazy. It's like, it's plausible that you would just play this and have it be good, but it also is a card that you can potentially fetch with triple Dark Raid, which I think is really strong. Potentially having a ground Sentinel off of triple Dark Raid is a capability that we haven't seen before, and which will be relatively easy to include in people's builds. Yeah, I think this is a card. This is what they call a French vanilla card, which is it's not quite vanilla. A vanilla card is where you only have stats and no text. A French vanilla card is where you only have stats and a keyword and no text. And so this is a French vanilla card, but I think this could definitely have a role, especially in triple Dark Raid decks, and I think it could be very solid. Next up, Nala Se, Clone Engineer. Might be mispronouncing that. I'm not entirely sure where this character is from. I think the Clone Wars cartoon, which I have not actually seen, but ignore the aspect penalty on clone units you play. Vigilance Villainy, and she deploys on 4 resources, but unlike every other leader that we've seen that deploys on 4 resources, she is not aggro. She's a 1/7, and she has the same ignore the aspect penalty on clone units you play text, plus each friendly clone unit gains when defeated heal 2 damage from your base. I think this leader is super interesting. She is so cool. So the clone units are typically heroism or neutral. Nala Se is going to allow you to do things like, let's say that you want to play the classic command vigilance villainy combo, blue-green villainy. We've seen that with Krennic, we've seen that with Kira, we've seen that with Iden. Well, now you can do it with Nala Se, and let's say that you have Energy Conversion Lab, you can play Wrecker ECL combo in your blue-green villain control deck. I think that's really good. And there's other stuff you can do with it too. You can put tech in there. You can like there are a bunch of clone units, and I haven't even gone through and seen them all, but She opens up a lot of deck building possibilities that otherwise wouldn't go together. I think it's really interesting. She potentially offers some healing. The fact that she's a 1/7 is going to be annoying for opponents to get off the board. I think this is a really cool and interesting leader, and I'm excited to see how she does. Shadowed Intentions, 3-cost upgrade. It is cunning. Attached unit gains. This unit can't be captured, defeated, or returned to its owner's hand by enemy card abilities. +0/+0. I think this card is highly overrated. Some people have said this card is really, really, really good. I think the thing is they're a little mixed up in my opinion. So I believe Lurking TIE Phantom has a similar effect. The thing about Lurking TIE Phantom, though, is it says damaged. This unit can't be captured, damaged, or defeated by enemy card abilities. Now we're going to return here to Shadowed Intentions. Can't be captured, defeated, or returned to its owner's hand by enemy card abilities. The problem with this is they can still kill your unit by normal damage, which means you can put this on a unit and they just play open fire on it and kill it because the damage kills it. The card ability didn't kill it. The card ability put the damage on it and then the damage killed it. This only blocks things like Takedown or Rival's Fall or whatever. As a result of that, it's not really very good. Because the Lurking TIE Phantom, you pay 3 and you get a unit that has a text that makes it difficult to deal with. This you pay 3 to give a unit that's already on the field text that makes it more difficult to deal with, and then that text doesn't actually work against normal damage effects. There are some possibilities where this card is really good. You know, maybe you put this on Chirrut, and now his ability already makes him annoying to deal with damage. Now the opponent can only deal with him with damage. So they try to put damage on him, and then you can do your tricks with healing and experience and stuff, and it's potentially really annoying. Maybe you have Boba Fett, and you put Boba's armor on him, and then you put this on him too. And they can defeat him with damage, but that Boba's armor is reducing it, and he's really hard to deal with. That could be a potential answer to some of the more control type decks that are running these big defeat effects, and like Rival's Fall. You know, this does block Rival's Fall if you put it on your leader. So I'm not saying this card has no use, but I think people are more scared of it than they should be. The fact that it doesn't block normal damage and that it doesn't provide any stats is a major weakness. The Phantom costs the same as this and comes with a pretty relevant body, a 2/2 raid 2 in space that the effect is built into, and this doesn't come with a body, doesn't give you any bonus stats, and doesn't protect you from normal damage. It does protect you from bounce. The Lurking TIE Phantom doesn't protect you from bounce, and this does. So maybe that's good enough. I don't know. I'm skeptical. I don't think it's unplayable, but I think it's a lot narrower than people think because it doesn't work on damage effects. Chancellor Palpatine, playing both sides. This is maybe the most interesting leader in the game. So this is a cunning heroism leader. He starts with this side face up. Action, exhaust. If a friendly heroism unit was defeated this phase, draw a card, heal 2 damage from your base, then flip this leader. And then he becomes Darth Sidious, playing both sides. Action, exhaust. If you played a villainy card this phase, create a clone trooper token, deal 2 damage to each enemy base, then flip this leader. So this guy is potentially switching from being a heroism and being a villainy leader at different points in the game. And that is so cool. So as I understand it, when he's on his Chancellor Palpatine side, you don't have an aspect penalty for heroism, and when he's on his Darth Sidious side, you don't have an aspect penalty for villainy. So you also don't have a leader deployment. This is the only thing this leader does, but this effect is really, really powerful. So sorry, I got the hiccups here. I think the question becomes, how do you maximize this? So ideally, you have a deck where you're playing this heroism stuff, and then maybe it's getting defeated, you're switching over, then you play a villain card, then you switch back to the heroism side, and you just repeatedly switch back and forth and use those leader flips to generate huge value. And, I think it's so cool. Is it going to be good? I have no idea. This could be the worst leader in the game or the best leader in the game. It is super high uncertainty for me, but I think it's such a cool concept and so thematically fitting for the Clone Wars era. Very interested to see how this goes. Finn on the run, 3-cost double vigilance ground unit, 3/4 fringe trooper. When this unit completes an attack, choose a unique unit. For this phase, if damage would be dealt to that unit, prevent 1 of that damage. Look, I like Finn in the movies. I do not like Finn in this game, unfortunately. I think Leader Finn is one of the worst leaders in the game, and I think that Unit Finn here, I don't think he's as bad as Leader Finn, but I think 3 for a 3/4 is not, it's not a horrible stat line, but it's not an amazing stat line now that 3-cost 3/5s exist. When this unit completes an attack, choose a unique unit. For this phase, if damage would be dealt to that unit, prevent 1 of that damage. It's a kind of cool ability, but I think it's sort of narrow and specific. And the fact that it's when this unit completes an attack instead of on attack makes it a lot worse. If it were on attack, he could use it on himself to take less damage from the attack that he was making, but he can't do that. He can put it on himself after attacking to make him harder to deal with after, but the timing doesn't seem great. The stats are like, I would have liked to see this guy at 3/5 and or with this being an on attack ability, and then I think it would be really cool. Right now it feels close but not quite there, unfortunately. I do like the character, I just don't think the card is I don't think the card's incredible. The Zillo Beast, Awoken from the Depths, 9-cost vigilance ground unit, 10/10 creature. When played, give each enemy ground unit -5 power for this phase, and when the regroup phase starts, heal 5 damage from this unit. I think this thing is really cool. I don't know how good it's going to be, but it potentially makes it so all their ground units don't do damage or do very little damage, and then it also heals, so it's difficult to incrementally defeat it. It is a powerful unit in terms of stats. 9 for a 10/10 is pretty sweet, and the fact that the when played effect is likely going to make it so their ground arena can't really do much damage means that it gets around the big unit with no immediate board impact problem that a bunch of other cards have. I think this is really cool. Now, is it going to be on the same level as other potential big closer win condition type units like Supreme Leader Snoke or Avenger? I'm not sure, but I'd be excited to see this, and it is worth noting that some of those other big closer units in Vigilance are villainy, and this one is not. So a heroism deck can bring out the Zillo Beast just as a villainy deck can, and it'll be interesting to see how those decks do. Death by Droids, 5-cost event. Defeat a unit that costs 3 or less. Create 2 battle droid tokens. I think this is cool. So the problem with this is that paying 5 to defeat a 3-cost unit isn't amazing, but there are still some times when you would want to do it, especially if you see a unit that's like loaded up with upgrades or is an unusually high value 3-cost unit, like playing this against a Millennium Falcon or against Toro Calican, or, you know, a cheap unit that someone buffed with a wing leader or something could well be nice. And then you're getting battle droids out of it as well. Seems pretty cool to me. Is it going to be worth playing this? I'm not sure. But I think it's totally playable and limited. Might see some constructed play as well, depending on where battle droid tokens end up. Next up, Foresight, 1-cost vigilance upgrade. Attached unit gains when the regroup phase starts. Before drawing cards, name a card, then look at the top card of your deck. If it's the named card, you may reveal and draw it. It's +0/+2. I think this is a strong card, especially for Yoda. So if we look at Leader Yoda, he has this ability that allows you to potentially manipulate what the top card of your deck is. And because of that, a card that is essentially making you call what the top card of your deck is to potentially draw it is really useful. Yeah, so Yoda Leader action, exhaust if a unit left, play this phase, draw a card, then put a card from your hand on the top or bottom of your deck. So Yoda can use this ability, control what's on the top of the deck, and then when your Foresight trigger goes off, you know it's there, so it's a free draw. Now, the main problem that I see with this card is that card advantage in this game is much worse than in other games. So I don't know that it's that worth it to play a card to draw, but I think there's a solid reason to expect that it might be, which is that this only costs 1, and it also gives +2 HP. So it's cheap, and it's not useless even if the draws aren't all that good or important. I think this card has a bunch of potential, at least for decks that have things like Yoda or R2-D2's ability that gives you some of that extra knowledge about what that top card of your deck is going to be. Also, if you're playing a Thrawn deck, this card is amazingly tight because Thrawn can just straight up look at what the top card of his deck is every turn. So this card is super good for Thrawn, in my opinion. Yeah, that is worth noting. And it's cool to see something like that because Thrawn has not been a very popular leader in competitive play, and things like this might be changing that. Jyn Erso Stardust, 2-cost aggression heroism ground unit, 3/2 with the rebel trait. While an enemy unit has been defeated this phase, this unit gains +1 power and gains Saboteur. 2 for a 3/2 is a reasonable stat line, and could well see some play. 2-cost 2/3 has been a little bit more popular for somewhat complicated reasons, at least in aggro decks. But I think Jyn's an interesting option. She doesn't die to ECL, or she does die to ECL Battlefield Marine or Sabine Explosives Artist, but she trades with them, which means that she is maybe going to be a little bit better than Sabine Explosives Artist if you're going second or against an ECL. And this ability is potentially going to get you some extra power and potentially Saboteur as well, which could be quite relevant. So overall, I think Jyn is a unit that might well be worth playing. She has the Rebel trait also, which is really good, arguably the best trait in the game. I think probably Force is better, but I think that aside from Force, Rebel is probably the best trait in the game, because the Rebel trait synergy cards are just really good. Fleet Lieutenant, Wing Leader, Medal Ceremony, they're just very solid cards. So I think Jyn is a unit that may well see a fair amount of play in those Rebel aggro decks. So, kind of a new card for a classic archetype, even if that archetype is mostly, even if this set is mostly focused on a different era of Star Wars, the Rebel deck's still getting a bit of love. Sly Moore, Secretive Advisor. This is a 3-cost cunning ground unit, 3/3 Republic official. When played, take control of an enemy token unit and ready it. At the start of the regroup phase, that token unit's owner takes control of it. I think this is cool. So again, this assumes that tokens are going to be a big deal, but you can potentially play this, gain control of their token, and then yes, they get it back. And you might say, well, if they get it back, this isn't all that good. You control a small unit just for one attack or whatever. But the thing is, you can then potentially use that token unit to attack into another one of their units, potentially defeating the token and the other unit at the same time, which would be really sweet, because then you would actually get a 3-for-1. You would play Sly. You would you play Sly, so you have a 3/3 on the board. That's one. Then you have the token that you stole, and you use that to kill another unit. So then this one card gave you a unit, killed the token, and killed the other unit. Really sweet, ideally. Now, our token decks and Clone Trooper decks in particular are going to be prevalent enough. It's better against Clone Troopers because Clone Troopers are 2/2 instead of 1/1. But I don't know, maybe someone's going for exploit. They have 2 battle droids in the field. You use Sly. You take one of the battle droids, charge into the other one. Seems pretty good. So I think this is a good counter to token type decks. Are those going to be prevalent enough for this to see a bunch of play? I'm not sure, but I think it's a cool counter. Unmasking the Conspiracy, 1-cost cunning event. Discard a card from your hand. If you do, look at an opponent's hand and discard a card from it. So this is a weird card. So it is card disadvantage, but it's also a cheap way to target your opponent's hand. So I think this could be good in a deck that otherwise has card advantage, or as another piece to try and destroy your opponent's hand completely. One downside of this is that I believe, because it says if you do, you have to have a card to discard from hand or else it doesn't work. So that is a bit of a downside. Ultimately, is Spark of Rebellion better than this? Almost certainly, but this is another piece of the hand destruction puzzle, and it's notably not heroic. Next up, Execute Order 66, 4-cost villainy event. Deal 6 damage to each Jedi unit. For each unit defeated this way, its controller creates a Clone Trooper token. This card seems very thematic, but I don't know that it's actually good. It is not common for people to have multiple Jedi units in play, and then even if they do, even if this kills them, they then get the Clone Trooper tokens. So it sort of seems like it would be a silver bullet for Jedi decks, but then even if it is a silver bullet, it also helps them by giving them those clones. I'm not complaining about this card theme wise. I think when people play this, we're going to hear some Palpatine impressions from the players, which should be funny, but I don't really think the power level is there. I could be wrong. I kind of hope I'm wrong because it's so thematic, but I don't know. I'm not sure this is going to be so good. All right, and that is going to do it for this batch of card previews, and we will have I believe there's going to be one more of these videos coming up. I may bring it out before I don't know what the exact timing is going to be. You know, there's a bunch of people who have like press kits from FFG, and I think we're going to see the whole set pretty soon. So I'll probably do one more of these videos covering the rest of the set whenever we know about it. So it'll probably be sooner than a week, because the normal preview season, I think, has basically ended, and we're going to get a big block of cards instead of the continued sort of slow burn. So I'll probably have another card preview video for Twilight up sometime in the next few days once we see the rest of the set. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll be back later with some more Star Wars Unlimited content. I will catch you guys later.